Welcome to this latest edition of What's Your Purpose? I'm John Quinton Barber, founder of Social, a communications agency that works across the UK alongside businesses and individuals to help them tell their story. Today I'm sat up in Northumberland around a kitchen table surrounded by maps in front of someone I think is a bit of a legend, someone I've got to know over the last 15 years, someone who's served in the army for 13 years, ran a boot camp for 15 years with his wife, and is also the first person to paddle across the length of the UK, almost 1,000 miles, not just paddling in a kayak, but actually carrying the kayak when there's no water. Morning, Dan.
Morning, John.
Bit of an intro, wasn't it?
That was a nice intro.
That's a great intro.
That's the best intro I've ever had.
Absolutely. Well, that's you, Dan. I think for the purpose, I just want to know, just tell us a bit about your background. Just tell us who you are. And, what's important to you.
So I'm originally from Stanley, County Durham. It's a little mining town just outside of Durham. Never done fantastic at school. I was always wanting to get out there, and I was always the one staring out the window, looking out into the distance and wondering what was, in that wood block up there, rather than paying attention in class. So my mind used to wander quite a lot. So I never done fantastic at school.
That's part of your story, Dan.
Absolutely.
From never doing fantastic. And there's a lot of people in the same boat. Schooling wasn't the right, potentially probably the right place to develop your skills and your talents, and it was for many.
Yeah.
But looking back at what you've achieved over the last probably 30 years of your life, you've achieved far more than anyone that I know in terms of adventure and your mindset. So I want to know really, what you've done over the last 20, 30 years has got you where you are now.
So when I left school, one thing that was always drilled into me from my family was, you've got to work, you've got to get a job. And I was just dying to get that first pay packet.
Yeah.
So I was always had a good work ethic, and I think if you start there.
And what was that first job?
That first job was bizarre. I was working. Well, the first one I had was working in a fishmonger's in Stanley, and I was still at school actually, and so I was packing fish. It was pretty brutal, but the worst part about that job was trying to scrub the smell off your hands on them all, and it was horrendous. And so that didn't last too long.
You're popular.
Yeah, it's funny. Everyone in the bus used to sort of move when I used to sit down. So I'd done that for a bit. But I just knew I had to get outside. I thought this is, I need to do more than this. And that was when that sort of sense of adventure started to brew.
Yeah. So then through hard graft, hard labour, through working through nights, you had this thought process, aspiration to join the army.
I did. And I always had a lust for the outdoors. Whenever I was off, we were out over to the lakes,
right,
walking. And we just wanted to be out, and say me and my friend Noel, we kind of hit it off, and it was a joint decision, really. We took a day off work, the pair of us, and went to the careers office.
Brilliant. Went
in, and on that day we signed up.
Wow.
Without telling our parents.
I was about to say, without telling your parents.
But we were 18,
Yeah, and what did they say?
Mum was happy, she was a bit shocked.
Yeah.
But, it was. She knew that's what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
So she was happy for me.
Yeah. So what we're talking? 1990s?
98.
98?
98, yeah.
Right, so you joined in 98.
Did.
Wow.
Went there, and that was, we joined the Royal Artillery. So you basically go to the careers office, and it all depends on who's on the desk that day, or who the recruiting sergeant is that day, what cap badge, and they'll try and promote their regiment the best they can, So me and Noel strolled in, and he was Royal Artillery, and he said, you join the Gunners, you two, you'll be perfect. And sold it to us and showed us all the pictures of people skiing and doing all this great stuff, which they do, they promote it.
Yeah.
And we signed up that day, and then 6 months later we were down on the train. But that was the sort of the first part of, really stepping out of my comfort zone, going into a place which I knew nothing about, and it was scary, getting that train down to Purbright, and it's the unknown. So
from that lad looking out the window at school, not feeling very confident, not really knowing what you're going to do, to then jumping on a train probably 3-4 years later.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a jump, isn't it?
It is, and I think you said this to me a while ago, was, grasping the nettles.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just got to grasp the nettles and let's just do it. What's the worst can happen? And I come back, at least I've tried it.
Yeah.
And that was the mentality I had, and I went for it.
And not only did you go for it, Dan, you did 2 tours, didn't you? You did a tour of Afghanistan, a tour of Northern Ireland.
A few, done 3 tours of Northern Ireland. So fast forward to 2004, Afghanistan.
So that lad with Noel walking into office at 18, doing them tours, and I keep going back to that time, looking out the window at school. You don't envisage where you're going to end up. You don't envisage what you're going to do.
No.
And you've got the beauty now, we all have, of looking back and going, wow. You've done your tours, you've done your army, very successfully, I'll say for you. You're a humble bloke, but I'll say that very successfully. And then out you come.
Yeah.
And into what?
So, in terms of career-wise and stuff, well, everything I was doing pretty well. I was a physical training instructor, so which I never thought I would be. These guys, when you join the military, you see these PTIs and you just you fear them. You just want to keep out of their way because they make you sweat and all that. But then I became one of them, because I had I'd done a bit of running and I got better at running. And someone said to me, my boss said, you should go for your PTIs course.
Yeah.
I never thought that would be me, but that was someone who's having the confidence in me and pushed me forward. And then again, grasped the nettles, done the course, and it wasn't that bad.
Yeah.
So that was my springboard. 13 years went, doing quite good for promotion. I was a sergeant, a few tours under my belt, but met my wife Caroline, and we had this idea.
Who's a force of nature?
Who was a force of nature?
In a great way.
Absolutely. Yeah. Brilliant, and we had this idea of running our own residential fitness and adventure retreat. With both of our backgrounds, Caroline's a sporty person, played hockey for England.
Yeah.
And with all my sort of training background, and she was an outdoor instructor as well. So we just combined that all together and put together Northern Boot Camp.
Yeah. And here you are, 15 years later, and as someone who's been on these boot camps over the last number of years, I can vouch that they are physical, really physical. But I've seen them grow from being all about the physical to all being about well-being and also about mindset. And I've literally seen people come here for a week's boot camp on a Friday night looking shell-shocked. What the hell are they doing? Leaving the following Friday with the scales lifted from their eyes. And that's down to you and Caroline, and that's down to the way you do in your technique. And I think for you and Caroline, the proof is that 80% of boot campers return.
Yeah.
And that any business would want that, and so you're doing something great. So here we are, in the kitchen of boot camp.
Yeah.
On a table that I know that's really important to you, because there's a lot of thinking. We'll come on to that.
Absolutely. I never thought I would be a owner of two businesses now, but it just shows your life's full of ups and downs, and you never know what's around the corner. And maybe when I was that kid, back staring out the classroom, I wasn't ready to learn then, or maybe I was a different type of learner.
Yeah.
So it was when I got promoted to sergeant, that was it. And you had to have a grade of C or above in numeracy and literacy. And there was a couple of us didn't have that. Uh-huh. And they said, well, you can have your rank, but you're not going to get paid until you pass these two qualifications. So the three of us went to night school and we passed it like that, So
motivation.
Yeah, it's funny that, isn't
it?
It
is.
So I was ready to learn then, and it was easy.
It's great, and I particularly love it when I see people with that kind of story then sat in front of me with success under their belt. And success comes in many forms. It comes in monetary form, which is important, but I think it comes in many other forms which are really important.
Absolutely.
Which is about values, Dan.
Yeah.
And I think I want to hear all about the challenge you did in 2018. And I remember this moment significantly because I was at a boot camp and you were making me do press-ups. And he said, John, I want to do this challenge. I want to kayak from Scotland to Brighton, and I want to raise $5,000 for the Royal British Legion. And I went, well, when I could talk after my press-ups, I think I swore it. I said, Dan, $5,000's note, mate. You need to do 25 grand. And there you go. Right. So, but I want to know, and I think it's really interesting for the listeners, this about what you did. What was that moment you thought, I'm just going to do this challenge?
I think since leaving the military and working at boot camps, great. It's a challenge all the time, having different individuals in, and but I had something sort of burning that I hadn't quite done yet. Something that was whirring away. I need to do some sort of big challenge. So I guess first part of it is it was a bit of a test for me still. That I wanted to do something and I wanted to raise funds for a great charity. We were in Portugal on a boot camp because you run them abroad as well. And at the marina there was a group of people about to set off on an ocean row, a group of 4 in an ocean rowing boat, and they were going to row from Portugal, I think over to Rio or something crazy like that. It was like 3,000 miles or something like that. So I went down, I said, can I have a look at your setup, what you've got? And the guys were lovely. They're like, yeah, come in, showed me the boat, and I was just awe-inspired. And that was like, right, I've got to do something. This is amazing. I wish I was going with them. I wanted to be on that trip with them, break the mold a bit and do something that no one's done before. My thing really is kayaking or anything in the water, really. So I thought, I wonder if anyone's kayaked from the top of Scotland to the bottom. First of all, that was the first challenge. And I found out that a lot of people had done that. And then it was actually Caroline. Caroline said, why don't you just do the whole lot, all the way, just go all the way down if it's possible. So then I started looking at maps and plotting maps, and that's when it started. There's actually a route through from the top of Scotland all the way to the English Channel with a few walks in between. But that was the challenge, that was the challenge I set myself.
That's fascinating. I mean, the whole idea of just, picking an event, something that nobody's done before, and cracking on with it. So, tell us how it all came together.
So yeah, a lot of planning, a lot of studying maps, as I said, and that's just as exciting as doing the actual challenge, is all the prep. So that was a thing to think about as well. Not all rivers flow south or go the way you want them to go. They might look like they connect on the map, but they don't. As someone once pointed out to me, I was telling them which way I was going. It was part of Scotland, the Clyde River, and this guy said, "Does the Clyde not flow north?" And then I thought, let's have a look at the map and let's have a... Oh, yeah, actually it does. So
you'd have been in Scandinavia, wouldn't you?
Yeah, exactly. That'll be in the Irish Sea or something. But so there's all that to think about, but there's a big, massive canal network in between all rivers and lakes and lochs that you can almost link together, and it's doable.
Brilliant. And then, obviously, you made the announcement. Your instinct was to raise money.
Yeah.
For you're a veteran. For the Royal British
Legion, yeah.
So you went about that, prepping, getting it all together. Obviously, you needed to make a bit of an announcement and song and dance about actually what you're doing to raise money.
Yeah.
So I imagine, you said there, the prep was almost as exciting as actually doing it. I can imagine the prep was almost as tiring as actually, in different ways.
It is, and it can tiring on people in the house.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah.
Because I kind of got obsessed with it.
Yeah.
And I think you've got to, if you're doing something like that.
Yeah.
You've got to be obsessed with it and live, breathe and sleep it. Otherwise, such a long thing, you're not going to do it. You're going to fall foul if you kind of just put it to one side. So I did come obsessed with it, and I had to stop talking about it after a while because it was doing Caroline's head in. So, It is all encompassing, and it's something like that.
Yeah, but that obsession got you through it.
It's a healthy obsession, I think.
Yeah, I mean, 100 days on your own. I mean, yes, you were near civilization, but 100 days on your own to kayak, as I say, and I'll say it for you, Dan, not just kayaking, which is a skill in itself, but actually when you weren't kayaking, you're carrying a bloody thing behind you with all your kit.
Pulling it,
miles and miles over road, on terrain.
Yeah.
And just to do that, the mental and physical element. And I always remember you telling us the Boffey story. Tell us the Boffey story.
So on Rannoch Moor, which is probably the most desolate part of the whole journey, really, which is kind of central Highlands of Scotland. So I had all these bits and bobs of the journey which were in my head, which I was thinking, ooh, wonder what's going to happen when I get to this. But like Loch Ness, famous for its big waves, because you get those big westerlies that come across Loch Ness and they can whip up some big waves.
Yeah.
So getting through Loch Ness and then this big crossing over Rannoch Moor, and eventually got onto Rannoch Moor via the West Highland Way. So I pulled the kayak with this special trolley that were made for it up the hill. I had to have a sort of climbing harness attached to the trolley, just so the whole thing didn't roll back, because it's like 75 kgs of weight with these wheels. So we pulled it to the top, and then I got into sort of the interior, if you like, of Rannoch Moor. And big storm came in, of course it did. Massive storm came in. It was behind me and pushed me down Blackwater, which is a huge body of water. It's quite high up as well. And I got to the end and had to pitch the tent. Massive raging storm. Everything got wet. When the weather's driving rain for sort of 24 hours and more, don't care how good your branding is of clothing, it's going to get through. You're going to get wet. So everything was wet. the lock wasn't as big as I thought it was. It wasn't as big as it said on the map. I think due to they had a really hot summer, so that lock had actually retreated, or the reservoir, should I say, retreated quite a lot. So you were left with these boulders. It was like Mars, the surface, basically a riverbed or lake bed. So you had these huge boulders and this soggy, sort of sandy, muddy terrain, and it was zapping. And that went on for like 2 days, trying to find out where I was and get through Rannoch Moor. It was like a day and a half now. Everything's soaking. I was fatigued. I'd already, walked and paddled at least 150 mile from the top of Scotland. And I was starting to doubt myself, thinking, what have you took on here? This is just stupid, and having to pull all my kit, walk back for all my belongings from the kayak, get back to the kayak, pull that. And it was just over peat hags and bogs. And I thought, right, I'm going to have to jack this in. Thoughts were coming into my, negative thoughts.
Yeah.
And then you've got to kind of give yourself a shake, and think about, right, why are you doing this? Who are you doing this for? Sort of draw back on that. I carried on going, and then the mist cleared, and this little tin hut appeared. This little tin hut, and which is by the railway line, really remote, still a really remote place. And I went down to it. I ran down to it. I thought, oh, thank God. I hope to God this door's open in this hut, because sometimes they're locked. Opened it up, and there's this little fireplace, pile of logs, and like nice and dry, little haven. So morale just went up. I ran up, got all my kit, went in, and lit a fire. And instantly, once that fire was lit, just started to feel better about the whole thing. And well, actually, I can push on here, get things dried off. It's going to be all right. And so that was the pivotal point.
Oh, 100%. You were doing a lot of, documenting of your journey via video, texts.
Yeah.
And we always remember that photograph came through the bothy and the fire. Now, that was a fire and a bothy, in our warm beds that night. But you were like, the significance of that we didn't really get until you came back and tell that story.
To me, it was like the best hotel in the world. It really was. And it comes. Another big thing I got back from the paddle was just to appreciate the simple things in life, like having a roof over your head, and a warm cup of tea, those things.
Yeah. So that was 2018, almost 1,000 miles, the only person ever to have done that route, and we checked in again on that, and you still are the only person to have done that route. So I'm sat in front of a unique character, and you think that would be it. You think that you'd have scratched that big itch and on you go, and Caroline would have been satisfied and you're satisfied, and here we go. But here we are, sat around his kitchen table where you do a lot of planning, a lot of thinking, and next year in July you're going to be flying over to the Yukon, which you'll tell everyone where that is, and you're going to be going to the remotest part you could ever get to, and you're going to be hundreds of miles away from the nearest human. Doing what, Dan?
So I was warned when I finished the Paddle of Britain, and before I done the paddle, a guy said to me, you're going to have to book something else in, because you're going to want to do something else. I thought, let me just get through this first. But he was right. He was absolutely right. And when I finished that, you almost get kind of Stockholm syndrome. You want to sort of go back. You want that feeling again, because it is amazing. That challenge feeling, I call it,
Yeah.
You're in the moment, you're living in the moment, and it's a real rich feeling. So I wanted to do something else. Of course, the pandemic happened. Lots of things got in the way, I've got a family, I've got a business to run, 2 businesses to run.
Yeah.
So, but I still had a burning desire to do something. I was always sort of researching stuff and looking on maps, and as I do, I love maps, great big world map behind me, and toying on, possibly Mongolia and other places. And then I watched a video in the pandemic, actually, of this canoe trip in a really remote place in the Yukon, which is like northern Canada. There's the Hess River. So the Hess River is an advanced whitewater wilderness river, which people don't do very often because it's quite technical and it's really remote to get there, and that's what attracted me to it for some strange reason.
Well, the little lad looking out the window at school, looking for, looking outside for something else. There's a theme here, isn't there?
There is a theme, kind of and it comes back to that, and it's still in me.
Yeah.
Looking at those little tiny islands on the map, and I wonder what's there.
Yeah.
And now, all these years, 20 odd years of building up the skills, You know, I've got a keen interest in the outdoors and survival skills, and I've done loads of paddling. I'm a paddle guide, you know, canoe guide, kayak guide. I think I've sort of culminated it all together now, and I'm ready for this challenge.
And not only are you doing the challenge, Dan, but again, you're raising money.
Yeah.
You know, we come back to the fact that you've served in the British Army, you're a veteran. It's really important that our veterans are looked after.
Absolutely.
In the right way. So Paddle Britain did over 25 grand for Royal British
27.
Legion. 27 in fact.
£27,000.
Which was a far cry from the 5
Mind
grand.
blown. Mind blown. 5 grand, yeah.
And this time, you know, you're aiming to do what?
We're aiming for £30,000 this time, just
And for
from
who?
learning from what we done last time, we can achieve that.
Fantastic. And I wouldn't say it's unique, but this podcast isn't about bringing people to a studio. This podcast is not about getting people on Teams and doing it remotely. This podcast is about actually going out and meeting people where they're at. So we're sat around your table here, the kitchen table, which, as I said before, Dan, I know holds huge significance to you with all your planning. I've seen you do it. What's it mean to you, this place? This place
is the hub of everything that we do. You know, we live here as well as work here. All my kit's here. You know, we're changing lives here when people come and do our camps. So it's a kind of nucleus of everything. Yeah.
I suppose the final question I want to put to you, Dan, which is a culmination of everything you've said today and everything you've brought into this conversation. And it's a real simple question, but when you actually reflect on it, it's quite hard to answer. So I'm going to put you on the spot here and say, Dan, what's your purpose?
What's my purpose? I've been thinking about this a lot, and I've kind of narrowed it down to one thing, and I know what it is now. And it's to guide people, show people the great outdoors, and just show them how much fun they can have in it and how inspiring it can be, and maybe take people to places where they wouldn't necessarily have the confidence to go. So to guide people in the outdoors, I guess that's my purpose.
Dan, you've been a great guest. It's been fantastic being up here at Northern Boot Camp again, minus the press-ups. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome, mate.